Okay, next up we have Anna Samsonova here to moderate a panel on opening markets for artisanal gemstone miners. All the work we do won't matter if we can't actually get the materials to market. And we're going to change this thing economically for the most part. So what they have to say is really important, and I will turn it over to Anna.
Good morning, everyone. I am Anna Samsonova, and I'm so excited to be moderating this first panel here in Chicago, where I just moved to a year ago. So welcome to my new city. Thanks. Thank you so much for these panelists being here. I will let you guys introduce yourselves because no one can do that better. So Cristina, why don't you go ahead and start?
Hello? Okay, great. Cristina Villegas. I'm the Director of Sustainable Markets at PACT, based in Washington, D.C., and I'm the co-founder of the Moyo Gems program.
Hello? Okay. I'm Jessica Hudson. I'm co-founder of Virtu Gem, a jewelry designer and GIA graduate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sejal Karavadia, Director of Procurement and Vendor Management at Brilliant Earth. I am also a gemologist and based in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pauline Mundia. I'm the ambassador of Virtu Gem for Zambia. I've been in the sector as an artisanal small-scale miner for more than 30 years. At the same time, I'm the vice president for the Federation of Small-Scale Mining Association. Thank you.
Wonderful. And again, thank you so much for being here today, a lot of you from far away. Cristina, I'm going to start with you. How does your work on gemstone valuation and market skills at the mines lay a foundation for market engagement with ASM? And also, how has it evolved over the years?
Yeah, a lot of you are familiar with the GIA program, which started about 6 years ago. No, 7 years ago. It started with GIA realizing that they had a opportunity to reach those who are mining the gems themselves and to start educating them about what they had, the value factors, how to really examine what they have. And that was the beginning of their own gemology journeys because they realized that people who were mining with stones knew the least about them. And I think that kind of created a ripple effect around the world, to be quite frank. We started off in this little, 6 little villages in Tanzania and in the Tanga area, which you've probably heard me talk about over the years. And then we met these women miners. We focused on women. And then we've expanded it throughout Tanzania. And then we just actually were in the field with Pauline about a month ago, my colleagues were. And so we're really expanding throughout Africa to help bring this education about gemology to the miners, who are bringing it out of the ground. How it's evolved is that, from that little program became a big program, but it also, I think, got the attention of the jewelry sector, and from there we were able to establish traceability in artisanal mining environments, which, to my knowledge, had not been done before, and then we scaled it. So we're really starting to bring the stories of these miners to the world, and the world wanted to hear more. A small little initiative can grow. And traceability is the first step to then improving conditions because you understand where your stuff comes from. You understand, okay, what should I be? You start to understand the conditions and the people involved with that mine, and then you can start improving it over time. Without traceability, you really don't know where your stuff's coming from. I guess the Moyo program, was built off of the GIA one. And we're helping allow miners to be seen by people who want to meet them. So that's a nutshell, a summary of how a little program, really created a ripple around the world.
That's great. Jessica, can you talk a little bit more about Virtu Gem and how that is also helping the cause?
Yeah, so Virtu Gem started out of COVID, right? And essentially it was just creating a virtual platform and providing a give back to create food drives to help the miners. And then from there, as COVID kind of died down a bit, it was, how can we really add value and job creation, which I think having in-country cutting was a huge part of that. And facilitating workshops and education to help understand and expand markets.
And speaking of cutting, how did the miners and cutters react to gems being charged a repolishing fee sometimes?
I think with explanation, it was understood, and I think the miners appreciated that, like knowing how they could improve, because essentially that would allow for them to sell more.
I think a big part of the conversation is communication, right? And finding out what works and how it works. So, Pauline, can you talk about how doing the work and following proper procedures can help with this?
Thank you very much. Every time when we are talking about mine to market concepts, one thing that we really have to understand and appreciate is information sharing. And when we talk about information, we should have the right information and from the right source. Because I remember the time when Virtu Gem was introduced to Zambia, it was actually a pilot project. Initially, it was not easy, but then somehow we made it because being the ambassador for Virtu Gem, I am been in the sector for 33 years, so I knew the people to work with in terms of sourcing. I'm part of the ASM, so it was very easy to know who is producing what. But then many times, one thing that really you have to appreciate is the need of market intelligence, which comes from the marketplace. And the people that were responsible for the market intelligence, it was Jessica, Susan. But now they needed to get that market intelligence to the ASM. And then it happened that I am the person that was receiving that information so that now I could take it to the ASM. But then I would say that it is a two-way kind of flowing of information because there's the market intelligence from the marketplace, and then there's also the source intelligence from the source from the ASM mine. So I would say that it's some kind of information exchange, and it's happened that I am in the middle of it all. Cushioning or receiving the information from the marketplace and also at the same time receiving the information from the ASM. But then, the more you receive that information, the more the information is flowing, there's a creation of mutual understanding, of mutual trust of what it's all about. Initially, in terms of just getting the stone, because it was the first time that Zambia was experiencing the digital marketing. And the issue was on getting the right picture, the right picture, so that that picture could be uploaded on the website. So we find that most of the pictures were not good, they were not accepted. So now we have to get now the information from the marketplace to say these pictures cannot be accepted, they are bad. So what can we do about it? I think that we need now to improve the quality. So in improving the quality, what did we have to do? So as Virtu Gem, we decided now to have the Gem Light and the iPhone, because none of us had the iPhone. So now we had to get that information, and because we got the information, we got the equipment, and then we ended up now providing the good pictures for the client.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Sejal, can you tell us from the buying side, how is it working with Virtu Gem, and how is it different from previous experiences of standard non-artisanal buying?
Yeah, I would say there are some differences, but the few that really come to mind is the connection. So at Brilliant Earth, we do require that every gem that we buy, we know the country of origin, we know the factory where it's cut and polished, but in working with artisanal mining, with Virtu gems, with Moyo, we know the whole story. We know who actually mined the gem, who actually cut and polished the gem, and you feel that instant connection. And it's a real live person who is, you know who it is, and I think it resonates really well with our customers as well. And just to add a little bit, Pauline was talking about the pictures. We're actually probably one of the first people when we were working with Jessica and Susan, and when they were sharing the pictures for us to buy. And I was trying to look at the pictures and trying to gauge if this is a gem we could keep. And then we were going back and forth, and they made such an effort. I was with Pauline as well on one of those calls, and they were showing us the gems live. And then they started taking the pictures. So it's been a journey, and it's beautiful. A journey, and I've learned a lot along the way.
Christina?
Yeah, in her opening remarks, Susan spoke about, how do we protect our industry? And I think, with Brilliant Earth buying both Moyo and Virtu and other programs, gems, and and the studio jewelers who are here, who are also buying, Moyo gems. I know, Cristina Male, just bought her first one, for her own collection. I think, we're protecting the industry by creating new experiences, for the customer, right? This has not been available before, and I think to survive, and also to keep consumer trust, we have to keep innovating and bring these stories to them. So my challenge for all the gem traders in the room is to start picking one thing and lean into that one thing and start communicating about it and start your own transparency journey, because we've created these programs and they're wonderful, but our programs will not save the world. Right, we each need to lean into our own supply chains and start working the transparency in these human-focused these stories that our consumers can connect with, and I think that will save the industry and also make it a better place for everyone in the supply chain. If if different folks are elevated, if we know where we're sourcing from, and we can tell that to consumers with real proof points, such as geotags, photos from the mine, testimonials, things like that. So, bravo, Brilliant Earth, for creating that consumer experience, and to everybody who's been buying the good stuff. And I think our whole industry needs to do more in developing like a sea of stories, or I'm not quite sure the metaphor. I should work on that. To make this industry more beautiful.
Actually wanted to add one thing to what you said. So when we're buying our normal gems, we have certain standards for our gemologists to adhere to, like eye clean. And what I have realized is that when the gems come from artisanal mining, we've kind of changed our standards a little bit and kind of made it an individual story. And customers are very, very receptive, and they're buying gems which, if they were from a regular supply chain, they probably would not have bought. They have been buying these, and we've been learning along the way how much the customers enjoy knowing about how these gems are different, and they're not focusing on, is it a perfect gem? They're focusing on the story behind the gem. So
That's actually a great segue to the next question. When you started working with artisanal miners, you didn't just reject the stones and stop working with them, which really was a monumental shift in opening up those markets. So can you talk more to the retailers in the room about opening up that conversation and that allowance of learning that happens?
yeah, it's been a great journey, and I would say the biggest part is it's a two-way street. I mean, we've had so much collaboration, and Virtu and Moyo and everyone has been so open to our feedback. So when we first started, like I was mentioning, we were trying to, it's not easy to just get the gems all for review and then send back. And so we were trying to look, and they made such an effort to improve the photographs, to try to give us video clips, and then feedback that we provided in terms of cutting and polishing. They took it back to the source country and they were training the people there to make their goods more marketable, which is probably a huge deal for them as well. I remember, Jessica, when you asked me if we could give more feedback, and we would make a list of all the gems we received, and then we would put feedback in the column on what didn't work for the gems that we couldn't keep, and you actually took that feedback to the, I mean, it was wonderful, the amount of effort you guys put. I think one of the latest examples was we couldn't accept some of the gems because of some of the abrasions, and Jessica and Susan shared that the cutters and polishers did not have the right copper labs, and that was so touching. But I think they were making so much of an effort to get that equipment to the cutters and polishers along with Pauline, and so I think they're really moving along smoothly. We're all learning along the way.
I mean, if I can just add on to what she has said, because how the whole thing came about is that, you know, the artisanal miners were complaining. They were saying, but now it is taking too long. You know, we don't know what is happening. And when we take our stones, most of them come back. So what we did was we had a meeting with them. No, because sometimes information is better, it comes from the horse's mouth. So we had a meeting with them to explain to them, to say that the requirements for the market is this, only until you meet the standard. So I think in sourcing gemstones from ASM, it is very important to create a certain kind of standard which must be followed. And the standards were something that was new among the ASM. So it took a bit of time to rub it in until they were able to appreciate. And the time when I had gone to Kenya last year, I was asking my colleagues in Kenya, I said, but then how come you're selling more of your stones, no, to BE? And then Zambia is not doing that. So I said, no, it is the cutting. I said, how about the cutting? Can you show me, please just show me a piece. I need some kind of education. So when I went back to Zambia, I had a meeting with the cutters. He says, you cutters were always complaining, because what it is that when the stone takes long, you know, without any communication, there's an outcry from the ASM and also from the cutter. Because the ASM will take the stone to a cutter to say, I'll pay you when I'm paid. So in the meantime now, the cutter is saying, but when am I getting paid? And the ASM is saying, I'm not yet paid. Yeah. So then how can we avoid this? How can we close up? Because it seems there's this big gap. So now we had a meeting with the cutters and had a meeting with the ASM, telling them the same thing. So now with the cutters, we told them, I said, the way you cut your stones, because BE, their clientele is people who are actually getting engaged. Huh? They need smaller pieces. But when you give your stones to the cutters, you tell them, cut anything. They'll cut what they know. You don't give them the specifications. So these people, you should tell them to say, I need something like this. See? Because if you don't, from that time now, we could see that there was an improvement, actually. Right. So information is very, very important.
Yeah, you can't meet standards that have not been set and explained, right? Yes. Cristina?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight kind of the role of Pauline's group in making these things successful. So in both Moyo Gems and Virtu Gems, the partnership is very local with the miners, and then national with their associations. So in Tanzania, we work with the Tanzanian Women Miners Association, TAWOMA. They've been here before in person. You've met Salma and Eunice. And then in Virtu, they have a number of countries they work with. And in Zambia, one of the partners is Pauline's group, which is the Federation of Small-Scale Miners of Zambia. And the reason, there's lots of reasons that that's a really important partnership. Everyone's strengthening each other. And groups like Pauline's have a kind of translation function of really helping people understand what's being asked of them. But they also have that trust function because Pauline has been around a long time, and she's one of the sages of Zambia, Zambian ASM. And so there's a trust there that cutter will be paid, that miner will be paid because they know Pauline. Same with TAWOMA in Tanzania. They were able to convene all these women miners who have trust in them. And without that trust, they don't know whether to believe us or not, to believe whether we're coming back or not. So, in these, these international partnerships, having that trusted association or trusted body is so important because you can't do it alone. I think all of us, we have broad coalitions behind the brands that we put forward, but I just want to really emphasize how important groups like Pauline's is and TAWOMA is to making these things successful. And that translation thing is real because artisanal miners, in Moyo, about 60% have only gone to primary school. And in Tanzania where we operate, it used to be that women were the last to be put in school and first to be taken out. So that formal education is not there, and so we often ask local teachers to help us with some of these concepts about what we're asking, just so people really understand us. And we slow it down. So it takes a while for that translation to happen. And what is forced labor? We don't say forced labor. We'll talk about exactly what we mean. Does somebody take your ID card? Is anybody under 18 here? That's actually considered forced labor. Are you in debt to someone and being made to work it off? That's forced labor. So you have to kind of slow this process down, and each of us has a role. There's lots of hidden work behind the scenes to make this kind of assurance possible with lots of different folks in the supply chain.
Great. Jessica, can you talk a little bit more about that teaching and grading and valuation of cut stones and the example that was given about not having the right equipment for it and how Virtu helps?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is obviously communication and understanding and meeting each other in the middle. So for the standards and the expectations, understanding to be able to look at a gem and know the value is very difficult. So how to do that and, educating everyone on the ground what a gem is worth. So that, again, is creating workshops or access to learning that. And for the cutting, and that was huge because understanding what gem is settable, how can you set a certain, with the corners and everything like that. Because as a cutter, you're not setting the gem, right? So that's a very huge piece in that. And then going back to what Pauline was saying about, it's like there's a lot of mind shifts that I think need to happen with all parties. It's not just the miners, it's the consumers, it's the buyers. It's this mind shift that needs to be realized and understanding where we're all coming from, so that we can all work better together.
Further to what
Jessica has said, actually, from our experience in Zambia, because the instances whereby, the stone is rejected because of poor cutting, but when you look at the stone, it's a good stone, and there's needs, for repolishing. So when you approach the ASM, they would easily accept to have the stone to be repolished. They are willing to wait little longer to have that stone repolished, because they are looking at the end product, the value which will be attached to that stone. So the cost of having it redone is not a bother, but it's what they are going to get when the stone is repolished, because they know that the value will be much, much higher, and as such, it will be able to compensate for the long wait. So we have actually emphasized on the needs of value. When we are saying adding value, what kind of value are we adding? Are we adding value, a value that is able to sustain an ASM or the cutter? So they have made a choice. They actually make a choice because what they're interested in is what they're going to receive at the end of it. Thank you.
And Sejal, can you talk a little bit more about that value add and how it can be told in a story to the end consumer?
Yeah, to the consumer, we've been trying to educate them on the artisanal mining, and when our customers come in person, we've been talking about the journey and how, and I think customers today, consumers today, they really want to know about, these stories. They really, and I think it's the way that we present it to them that helps them understand and to move past what they used to think as imperfections, to learn that it is actually what makes the gem unique and what makes the gem special. And we've had webinars with Moyo, and we've talked to Susan, and we've talked to Jessica, and I think our team members feel closer to this whole initiative because we've been so involved, and more than being like us the buyer and them the supplier, I think we've been a team trying to bring this to our consumer, and I think that's really made a big difference.
So you're doing team trainings directly with them and telling
Yeah.
the message. I love that.
We have done that, yeah. Christina's met with our sales reps, and
Yeah, I did a webinar, like an internal webinar for the whole company, and I think it's called a lunch and learn session, where they just asked me to tell the story of Moyo and then have people ask questions. And I was delighted because they're the ones interacting with the consumers and selling, this is over here is a traditional emerald from, wherever, and then here's the Moyo gem, and, Hadija mined it. And watch this space in 2023. It's being done now. We're actually incorporating young women cutters into the Moyo supply chain. So they're mined by the women miners. 60% of all miners in the Moyo program are women, and then it'll be brought down to Dar es Salaam, where it's cut by women between ages of 18 and 25. Who've been formally trained and are precision cutters, and then it'll be exported perhaps to you if you place your order, and that's run by the Tuoma Youth Workshop. And I think the advantage that we've had in Tanzania is, before I talked about how women faced huge educational barriers because of their gender, because of priorities made at the household level. Now things have changed, which is wonderful. But the young girls have taken geometry, have finished high school, and are doing college and these certificate programs. So cutting at the source is now possible. It's not quite at the source, not quite the mines, because they don't have the math skills, unfortunately, to do that quickly, but the young women do. And how interesting would it be to tell the consumer, not only did Khadija mine your gem, but Sophia cut it, and then it was, and produced just for you. And you have young people's faces in that supply chain. I think that's. I mean, you can tell my excitement. I'm so excited. But the women are cutting right now. And I wanted to give a shout out to Brilliant Earth for helping us outfit their studio, to Wing of W. Wake for her contribution to Moyo, Mona Rich Khan, and the Flug family. So thank you, Chloe. They all heard about the studio and said, how can we help? And so we're bringing down more Ultratex and Facitrons, bringing supplies, and so they can be set up for business. It won't be a charitable program. This is just to get them started, and then we'll be working on pricing so they can start incorporating, aspects like when it breaks, what happens? We're not fixing it. You are. So understanding to build those into your pricing model. So watch this space. It's really exciting. I think it's really exciting that we're changing jewelry again to bring the faces of people that are in the supply chain, and also changing it up. Africa for many years was exporting raw, unprocessed material. Now it's high-end, faceted, beautiful gemstones, and that is a huge power shift in the industry, and I think we should celebrate that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep that going, because I think we recently spoke with Susan about doing a similar thing for Brilliant Earth, just want to keep all our team members keyed in with new developments and what's happening, so we'll be continuing to work with them closely.
Okay, I mean, just further to what you have mentioned, I think there's a very important point that I had actually missed out. We are also thinking of using the young girls, because we realize that some of these veteran cutters, change takes a bit of time. But now when you use the young ones, they are very easy to adapt the new concepts. So in Zambia we have a training center. Yes, it is called Ndola Gemstone Lapidary Processing Training Center. It trains young people how to cut and polish. And recently it has introduced a diploma course in jewelry making. So, but now at this center, they have what they call an incubator, and that incubator, is for the young ladies that graduate. And some of our stones are cut by the center, so by the same young ladies. So I can assure you, BE, that with the young ladies, young people can easily change. So you'll be able to see a very good improvement, in the way the stones are being cut.
Very excited for all that.
Thank you for sharing that. Jessica, can you talk a little bit more about the relationships and the knowledge sharing and setting the standards and sharing the standards and passing that communication down?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched just briefly on it before, but obviously it's been huge with BE's help and the flexibility that they have offered with Sejal and the calls that we've had, and been able to give back the information, which has helped with that, building the relationships with everybody. What else was it? Oh, and with the standards. So,
And also, how do you evaluate the demands and how to meet them at the end?
Well, evaluating the demands is really just, I'm not sure. You know, it's just, it's being flexible, like, and knowing what's needed and sharing that. And I think what was really great with recently, you know, the National Gem Cut that we also did was just creating something a little bit different. I know that doesn't go into standards, but really just meeting people where they're at, and understanding that you can't really just have a certificate or something like this, and understanding that everybody's doing the best that they can.
Yeah, you know, in artisanal environments, I think we demand a lot of them. We being the international community, and we kind of have to, I think, pause and think about that. Somebody who's making $2 a day, you know, what are we asking of them? And so, with the Moyo program, we asked for an ethical floor, and we decided not to adopt international standards as they were. We decided to change them to make them appropriate for our environment. And so we asked the miners to do a few things. First, take some free classes that we're offering in their villages in their language of value factors of a gem, so they understand what they're selling and they can negotiate confidently. Prove that they're working on a legal license. And that was actually really, I thought it was going to be really hard, but actually quite easy once we had some agreements with the government. But we had to give them a reason, of course, to get a legal license. Why would they? When no one's enforcing it, they have to pay money. They have to pay taxes. Then, why would they get that? So it's the incentive part that you really have to pay attention to. What are you asking them, and then what are you giving them, and keeping that ask low, and then progressively improving it over time. So imagine like an escalator. The top students can reach the fair mind and fair trade standards that we know, RJC, although RJC does not apply to ASM gemstones, by the way, or diamonds, by the way. So it's my challenge to them. I can help for free. Those standards aren't available, right? So let's be cognizant of what we're asking. So let's have an ethical floor, have them all meet that, help them meet that, and then give them more money to meet that. Thanks very much. And of course, in the Moyo program, we give between 3 and 10 times what they're making before. And imagine again, if your own income increased between 3 and 10 times, that would be for you. Mm-hmm. And in the Moyo program, what we've been seeing is that miners are telling us that they're building houses now. Instead of renting, they're building houses. Prishka, just one of the miners you might have seen in social media, she has like a kind of a toothy grin. And she said, because of the social programs that we operate, she's able to save and then take loans at reasonable rates, and then she had the cash money to then build a house. And there's lots of other stories, like some of the Maasai ladies. Maasai culture is very male dominant. And they said, I never imagined I could own my own cows. I just didn't think that was part of what could happen to me. But here I am owning my own cows, and that's been as a huge victory for her. These are tangible benefits, not only cash money, but also these these programs that we're attracting to the area. In exchange for being able to be a part of this program, we're asking a few things that are reasonable, that aren't, have a first aid training for every mine, have an environmental plan for every mine, have a restoration plan for every mine. These are very basic things that will allow your consumers to sleep at night and feel good about their purchase, and then give you the collateral that you need to tell their stories, and know that you're building a better place by buying these gems.
And Pauline, you've been doing this work and you've been following these proper procedures, but you also needed to know what they were first. So how can people pass down that information to you and to other artisanal miners?
Okay. Thank you very much. Getting information is not easy. It is a process. But then, from my experience, if you want to get the right information, one, you should have the passion for whatever we're trying to do. Without having the passion, you can easily give up. And then the other thing is that you should really should be patient, because people are getting that information for the first time. Some people might not appreciate it immediately. It will take a bit of time, so you really have to be patient with them. But then the end product is perfection. Because that's the reason why we share information. To overcome certain hurdles, you need the right information. So with the people in Zambia, as I mentioned much earlier, was that I am part of them, and it was very easy to know who is producing what. And like the issue in Zambia, if you are not licensed, even if you are an artisanal miner, you are not allowed to be in possession of a gemstone. As such, you cannot export. Those are the rules. So with me, even the issue of identifying the right freight company, it was not an issue, because it's something that I was already doing. And most of these ASM, some of them, it was their first time to actually pay tax for exporting their stones. So it was a matter of really rubbing it in for them to understand the need for them to pay tax. But eventually they accepted it. They accepted it. So the connectivity is what is very, very important, because the information is coming from the marketplace through Susan and Jessica. It's coming to me, who is now in the middle. I'm the cushion, I'm receiving that information. I'm also receiving the information from the ASM, so it is actually a two-way traffic. But eventually, we managed. We managed. And then the other thing also, it is an issue of training. Just a bit of gemological skill. It was an issue. So we had to help them. But then just recently, through PACT, they had this training, and somehow I got connected, because they wanted someone to help. I got connected, so they were giving that information, just basic gemological skill, which a lot of the ASM appreciated. And then I was surprised that there were more women who participated than men, because more women are not actually vulnerable and they don't have that information. So that kind of training is very, very important, because that also was through information sharing. Yeah. So information sharing is important, because it can lead you to have the right training. It can lead you to have the right market prices, like BE. See? So we need to share that information. And I believe that this already is a very good platform for sharing information. See? I think I would suggest that we should really come up with a kind of information exchange system or mechanism which we can be used, because there are a lot of people that are looking to get stones from ASM, and yet there is Moyo gems and there's Virtu gems. Why not get information from this? Yeah, instead of looking elsewhere. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just wanted, I clearly blinked on the standard question. So we worked with Craft, Virtu Gem worked with Craft, and we kind of, in collaboration with that, built Virtu Craft. And we're working in Malawi, Kenya, and Zambia. And all of these countries have a few mines that have established this Virtu Craft, these standards. And that's an ongoing process, right? And this is where the meeting in the middle comes through, where we're figuring out, what works with each mine and everyone to implement these kinds of standards. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
More on that one, the craft, actually, it is a system that provides an opportunity for the ASM to become responsible miners. Because we provide an assessment, because what we want as Virtu Gem, we don't want mines that are involved in child labor. Yes, we cannot get stones from such mines, we don't. So we tell them, anyone who wants to sell through Virtu Gem, no child labor, and we encourage them to employ women as sorters. So because we want women also to be part. Since Jessica and Susan are women. Yes. And then we also encourage them to be paying tax. We also tell them we cannot buy stones from other countries, no matter how beautiful that stone is. Because I remember one time, Susan were looking for pinky tourmaline. And then this lady who brought very beautiful pink tourmaline. I looked at the tourmaline, I knew that tourmaline was not from Zambia. Yeah. So I asked, where did you get this stone? Said, they're from DRC. I said, no, we cannot buy anything. That is not Zambian. See? But then they were surprised. But it's a beautiful one. I said, it's a beautiful one, but we are only interested in selling Zambian gemstones. So why? I said, we don't know the source of this stone, because every stone needs a story. What story are we going to talk about this stone?
That's great. I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because we were talking about the learning, I think flexibility is a big key here as a retailer, and working with Virtu and Moyo in the last few years. There are differences, like we bring in all the gems, we look at them, we buy what we like, we return. When I initially started, Susan and Jessica explained that you can't bring in all the gems because it's really hard to export them back. And then, working out ways to try to buy the maximum without having to bring them in to view them. But these are small, I wouldn't even say inconveniences, but changes in our mindset that if we make them, it does work out. It works out, and we're surprised at how much our consumers resonate and respond. So it's not as hard as it sounds. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it's doable.
Absolutely. I'm going to open it up to questions in the audience as well. Yes.
Hold on a second. We'll run you mics, okay? So that everyone can hear your question. I can do your mic. I'm still one of these. All right. So one of us will be in this aisle, and one of us will be in that aisle. And Cristina.
Thank you so much. I'm Cristina Mall, a goldsmith, also part of Ethical Metalsmiths, and especially Pauline for traveling so far. And I've heard a few references about how money moves through the system and being paid promptly, which makes so much sense because people need to buy food and firewood. And you also made a reference, Cristina, to something about how money moves through the system. And I'm wondering, Pauline especially, can you tell us, what would you like us to know? What are we not aware of? Please pardon my ignorance. I don't really understand how, what is the biggest challenge to improving that system of how money flows how cutters and miners can be paid more promptly? And is wireless money, since so many people have phones, is that changing the way miners and cutters are being paid? And is that helpful? And is that an improvement? And how can we support you all in your quests to be paid more fairly and promptly? Sorry, it was like 10,000 questions, but I'm just so curious. Thank you.
Pauline, go ahead.
You want me to answer right now, right away?
If you want to think about it, Cristina, if you want to start.
Okay.
Maybe I can start, and then you can go next.
You can answer.
Okay.
Yes.
So when we do market days is when we convene the miners and they sell their gems. They don't have to. They're not required to. If they like the price, then they sell. If they don't, then they're happy, or it can go somewhere else, but they usually like the price. And we give them feedback. So we pay them cash money then. And so how that happens is Stuart, for example, will place an order based on folks he's talked to, and he'll send that to the exporter, who is actually at the buying table, buying from the miners, and so that person has gotten cash beforehand, or we'll pay them in M-Pesa or Tigo Pesa, like these it's like Venmo, imagine that. And women tend to prefer the mobile money option because it's more secure for them. They're not carrying a bunch of money in their purse. So they prefer it even though there's fees. But we want to honor the miner and their preferences, and some miners like cash and others prefer the Venmo equivalent. And then for the Tuomo workshop, what we've done is we have a European jewelry partner called A Beautiful Story. They created a beautiful story by this project, but they have pre-financed Tuoma to ahead of time, saying, Tuoma, here's $10,000. Please buy X amount of these kind of stones, this color. And so Tuoma doesn't have to front that immediately. They're getting it ahead of time. Then they go to market day and buy from the miners. So that's how it works. And so the pre-financing is really important, because who has $10,000 in this country just to buy gemstones, unless you're with a brand. So it's these pre-financing logistics that are really important, and of course you need trusted partners if you're going to send that kind of money somewhere, and then groups like PACT to make sure it's being purchased at market day. We have checks and documentation on the ground, then load it on blockchain, and then so that's a more complicated system, but that's how the money flows.
Okay, now on the part of, she has answered on the part of the ASM, but now on the cutters, when we had a discussion with the cutters, we discovered that most of the cutters do not have is it the loop? And then the other thing also was is it the grit, that powder? So as Virtu Gem, we are providing that. Actually, I'll go back with the with the powders, so that they are able to polish the actually acceptable standard, and also with the loops. So that's the help that we are giving to the cutters, because in terms of because I know that there were cases whereby they would say there's a window, with the stones. Yes, so that has been clarified. We have spoken to them, and we have seen changes. So all I can say is that there's an improvement, with that kind of help that we are providing to the cutters. It will really help. And at the same time, the time when Susan came to Zambia last month, she was able to meet some of the cutters, and they had a very good meeting. And we are also planning to have one big meeting, a virtual meeting with our cutters, and as well as the ASM, so that at least we can be discussing the same same things at the same time. Thank you.
So it sounds like payment up front, preferably over mobile transaction and potential tool and supply help. Right? Wonderful. Next question.
I do have a question from the virtual audience while Sherry and Elizabetta run the mics. So Dolores says, I am fascinated about the value add brought about by ASM cutters by attaching a story to an imperfectly cut gem, making it unique. What kind of retailers are leading this trend? Is this practice transferable to the mainstream industry?
Well, sometimes they're cut beautifully, so it might not be imperfect. Actually, might be a beautiful cut, but I think there's a learning curve, especially when you start getting into mass production. So, like the commercial production, and making sure your corners are consistent and it's the same product. So, I think it's a learning curve, and the quality control needs to be kind of focused on. Anything else?
Yeah. I think creative cuts too can be a value in there. And as far as some of that question, I can't answer, like which retailers. I know there's some, but I don't know the names of all. And then it's not just cutting too, right? It's inclusions that can, depending on what the inclusion is and how the gem is cut, can really accentuate that. So, yeah.
I think it's also a little bit easier for an independent to start and do this. And it's maybe a larger learning curve and acceptance in a corporate world and a little bit more hoops to jump through. So I know Brilliant Earth, obviously, you guys are doing it. Do you know of anyone else that's alongside you?
I like to say that the bigger players can do collections. If you don't want to mainstream right away, you can do a collection, see how it goes. And both Virtu gems and Moyo gems now has traceable melee. Mic drop.
That's great.
Traceable colored melee, which is still an issue in diamonds. No longer in gems and colored gems. So we're able to service a lot bigger players now with that offering. That could be side stones or more affordable center stones. So I think, between the traditional center stone offering and the melee offering, I think there's lots of choice available to even the bigger players.
That's great. Brandy, I think you have the mic.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for being here and for the great insight. I actually have a question for Sejal. I'm on the marketing side, and obviously, in order for people to get interested in our products, we have to let them know about it. And so I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about the customer for this kind of product. And are they coming to your website and asking for this product, or are you marketing it to them? Is there a particular kind of feel for that person who is interested, or are you starting to see it be more of a, anyone and every?
Yeah, I don't think we've had customers in the past actually come and said, do you have artisanally mined gems? I think a lot of it was marketing. We do a lot of organic as well as paid marketing, and we have been educating our sales reps with regular trainings to talk about these gems. We also don't buy these gems on order. We buy them, so we have them on hand. We have them in all our showrooms as well. So if a customer comes in, they are able to actually view these gems, and because our sales reps are all trained as well, they can talk to the story behind these gems. And then our website has different education areas where you can learn more about Moyo, Virtu, artisanal mining, and then we do a lot of other social media marketing periodically to keep the customers engaged and keep them aware.
My question is a follow-up on Brandy's. I've heard from people in the retail space that one of the objections to carrying this type of gemstone is we're also carrying other gemstones, and if we have this one product that has this story, nobody's going to want the, how do you have both at the same time? And Cristina mentioned collections, and I'm just wondering, how did how has Brilliant Earth internally discussed supporting both sides of the market? And are you encountering any of that kind of feedback from customers, you know, when they hear about the one type of gemstones with this beautiful story, and then they ask, well, what about this one? You know, are your salespeople dealing with that?
Yeah, so basically I think what we've tried to do is we offer artisanally mined, we offer the regular offerings, but we've tied it into our mission. Overall, all our gems are traceable. We don't, like, we talk about the origin of the gemstones, and beyond that, if a customer is interested in learning more about their gem, learning more about the story behind it, that's where they have the special showcase of the artisanally mined gems. So we've made a conscious effort to tie everything in together under our bigger mission umbrella. So we have not encountered customers asking us about why we offer both, or we have not seen them competing, the collections competing or the gems competing against each other.
I think we might have time for one more.
I have the mic, so I guess it's me. Christina, you mentioned that with this project, a lot of the time we're paying 3 to 10 times what they used to make. Does that create like tension within the communities and between the idea of not having like a bunch of cash in your purse sort of concept? What are things to be aware of with having that increase in income for those people?
Yeah, great question. That's something that I was very concerned about from the very beginning. And so we created some feedback loops from the very beginning. And feedback loops in this area means talking to a lot of folks, whether it be the village chairman, kind of like the chief equivalent, and then the leaders of the different village savings and loan programs that we run. They're women from the area or mentors from the area. And then the women themselves. And then Tuwoma also keeps, our partner Tuwoma also keeps a very close eye on this because they don't want their members being targeted. An early decision that we made was to let men in the program. And it's because we didn't want to make anybody a target, and we wanted to have a shared success. So the communities would want this to continue because everyone is benefiting, and so no one is targeted. And so I think if we were only let women in the program, that would have caused a lot of problems because women and men mine together. Oftentimes, sometimes women mine in small groups and they share the labor. So, you know, I might be sharing a sieve to divide the labor just to account for the physical differences between men and women. But sometimes it's Prishka in mine with 3 other women and 10 men. And so why would we leave them out? Because they were allies before, and why would we estrange them? So we decided to make that allowance allow up to 40% men, but really keep the emphasis on women. And that's hard. It's hard because quality is different, and we have to do a lot more work. But it's really important to us. And Stuart is one of the co-founders of Moyo. He's right here if you want to place an order. You know, him and the other traders that are part of the Moyo kind of steering committee, they've doubled down on women. They said that if Moyo grows, we want to keep women at the center because that's what got the world's attention, and that's who really needs this. But to make sure we're not creating harm, we monitor very closely, and that has not happened. Hallelujah. It's because the villages are thriving as a whole. That's kind of like the secret sauce.
Thank you, and thank you again so much to all of you. I know there are a few more questions in the room. Sorry that we're not getting to them, but I am sure all of the panelists will be available to answer questions in the breaks as well. So thank you, and our next panel.